invited. He couldn't come, but we've had Dave Douglas, and now we've got the former Vice President of the Yorkshire NUM, Ken Capstick.
Well, thank you very much. It's a tremendous privilege for me to be invited to come here and speak on the 30th anniversary of the battle that we fought here at Orgreave. We came to Orgreave primarily with the aim of fighting for our jobs, our coal mines and our communities. Orgreave will be remembered by history as a place where unacceptable state violence was unleashed on one section of the British people. They were guilty of a crime against their own people. We were here guilty of only one crime, and that crime of fighting a noble cause to save our industry. The monstrous police violence here was not reserved for men alone. We all know that. It was ruthlessly visited upon women as well. And it was not until a delegate at the Labour Party conference draped that infamous photograph over the podium that showed a police thug on horseback wielding a truncheon above the head of a defenceless woman, that finally that photograph received mass exposure. The horrendous violence committed by the police, and which we faced daily, not just at Orgreave, but let's not forget in our villages and sometimes even in our homes, would never have reached the gaze of the British people had we not battled and fought to get the truth out there, because the British media had no intention of telling people the truth of what was taking place during that strike. And if the media are here today, I've no doubt they are, they should hang their heads in shame. I hold them just as responsible as the police for the violence that took place here at Orgreave. In mining communities, we will never ever forget how the BBC reversed the footage at Orgreave to try and present us in the worst possible light. And that footage could have ended up with 93 miners being convicted of riot because they were unjustly prosecuted. And thanks to Michael Mansfield, they were all acquitted. They were out to criminalise as many miners as they possibly could. And at that trial, we had to put up with police lies, which were exposed, as well as the lies of the media. And that led to the acquittal of innocent miners fighting for their industry. Yet, it was in mining communities where miners were vilified as thugs, as wreckers, as louts, holding the country to ransom, and as if that wasn't enough, finally they called us the enemy within. was the exposing of media corrupt reporting and police distortions of facts that saved those miners from possibly long jail sentences for the serious crime of riot. But they were innocent, while those representing the state were guilty and allowed to get away with it. They were guilty of perverting the course of justice. That's why we want an inquiry. They were guilty of false imprisonment during the strike, and that's why we want an inquiry. They were guilty of bearing false witness. That's why we want an inquiry. And they were guilty of conspiracy, and that is why we want an inquiry. They were the real enemy within, not the miners. Orgreave was an epic battle. The state and its police, reinforced by members of the armed forces, let's not forget that, by members of the armed forces, if the BBC is here, they were there with their riot gear and their batons and their shields, ranged against miners in t-shirts and plimsolls. Now, it wasn't Naseby, it wasn't Marston Moor, it wasn't Towton, and it wasn't Bosworth Field, but for those of us who were here, it felt like civil war. And we should let them know that. Just like Peterloo, a massacre at St. Peter's Fields in Manchester in 1819, when 60,000 peaceful demonstrators turned up there. Peaceful demonstrators, men, women and children. And they were murdered, chopped down and mutilated as a result of a cavalry sabre charge that took place. 15 people were killed and between 400 and 700 injured. So Orgreave wasn't the first time this kind of thing had happened. They were only wanting the right to vote. Peterloo was not a defeat. It was not a defeat. It was part of the struggle that eventually led to people getting democratic rights in this country. Orgreave was also a momentous event in working class history. And the very fact that we are here today, 30 years on, should tell the defeatist scribes that Orgreave was not a defeat either. The victory at Orgreave was in the very struggle itself. And I have little time for those with myopic perspectives of history who tell us we've been defeated. Let me tell you what defeat would have looked like, because I know exactly what defeat would have looked like. Defeat would have represented us laying down and accepting Margaret Thatcher's steamroller to close our pits without a fight back. That's what defeat would have looked like. The victory that we won was in the fact that we stood up and we fought back for a whole year. That was our victory. It remains our victory today. We must at all times remain proud of our history and vigilant in guarding it against knaves who seek to rewrite or undermine it. Our class was and remains totally justified, even more today after the cabinet revelations of earlier this year. The leadership leadership of that year-long strike, I make no apology for saying this, was faultless and has been vindicated. But it is picked over endlessly by academics who would not understand the realities of class struggle when the sharp edges are no longer the stuff of academic theory and are laid bare. Among these traitors you will find journalists, hacks who wouldn't know the difference between class struggle and a game of tiddlywinks. Those who have attacked, even in recent times, the leaders of our miners' strike, our great miners' strike, in particular attacks on Arthur Scargill, play straight into the hands of the British establishment and those very same forces of the state that attacked us here at Orgreave in 1984. Just 5 years after two former Guardian journalists, Beckett and Henke, published a silly book called Marching to the Fault Line, in which they criticised just about every decision that Scargill took during the strike. The cabinet papers were released this year, vindicated him and every move that he took, and made that book a laughing stock to read. In that book, for instance, it tells you they weren't here. In that book they claimed that we were kettled at Orgreave. We were never kettled at Orgreave. It's a ridiculous suggestion. I have personal experience of being kettled at Grunwick in 1977. And let me tell you this, it's an horrendous experience to go through. We were not kettled at Orgreave. I'll tell you what kettling is like. The police corral you into a very tight space. You could almost call it like the Black Hole of Calcutta, and they press you in there until you can't breathe. They frighten people to death that they're never going to get out of there alive. That's kettling, and I've experienced it. We weren't kettled at Orgreave. It was a massive field. And let me tell you something else. We were on the low side of the police at Orgreave, and we were on the top side. And people who went to Orgreave here will know that. If anyone was kettled at Orgreave, it was the police, not the miners. And I can tell this meeting that there are those still smarting that Scargill has been proved right after those cabinet revelations. And they will stop at nothing to renew their personal attacks on him. And through him, the justification for the strike itself. We must be aware of these ever-present destructive elements. Scargill's legacy and our legacy of great class struggle is still seen as a massive threat to the British establishment. His words and his unswerving determination in the face of continuous personal attacks that would have destroyed any lesser man remain an inspiration and a rallying call for workers, not just in Britain, but right across the world. Those who attacked Scargill's legacy, especially those in the trade union and labour movement, should hang their heads in shame. They were and are political recently with that shocking Inside Out programme that was nothing but a pack of lies. The likes of Kevin Barron, the likes of Roger Windsor. Kevin Barron's got an eye to it, Sir Kevin. Roger Windsor will probably get an eye to it before he's done. They are our enemies and they might as well go and stand in the ranks of the scabs. That's where they ought to be. We are the ones with nothing to fear whatsoever from an inquiry into the events that took place here 30 years ago. But there are those, of course, with much to fear. I have spoken in recent times on a number of occasions with Barbara Jackson, and I want to pay tribute to her and the magnificent and tireless effort and her boundless energy which you saw today in promoting the Orgreave Truth and Justice campaign, and all those who have worked tirelessly with her as well over the past few months to bring this about. The miners' strike was about much, much more than pits, jobs, communities. As important as they were to us, it was about a clash of values. Thatcher believed in the free market liberalisation, as Dave Douglas has pointed out, and it was a philosophy of greed. Greed, greed, and more greed was what she believed in. We had nobler values than that. We believed in the brotherhood of man. We believe in taking care of our old and our young, the disabled and the infirm. And we believe in a national health service free at the time of need, in public ownership and free from privatisation. Thatcher believed in none of those things. In short, we believed in society and she did not. We only have to look at our great manufacturing industries to see the result of her economic madness. Shipbuilding decimated, car industry moribund, steel industry defunct, the mining industry butchered. The butchering of our mining industry has destroyed the UK's energy security. We are now net importers of energy, and we tried to tell the Labour government when they were in power, and yes, they hold a lot of the responsibility for Britain's energy situation. Now we import 44.8 million tonnes of coal every year, and 18 million tonnes of that comes in from Russia, probably the most politically unstable region in the world at the moment. Without coal, our lights would go out every single year. We still need coal. People think that coal is the fuel of the past. They need to go to Immingham and watch it coming in. Our nuclear power stations are clapped out, and new nuclear will not come on stream for years. In any event, it will be prohibitively expensive, not just in monetary terms, but in economic and environmental terms for future generations. Renewable energy is, perhaps we shouldn't have had the word in. Renewable energy is currently a fantasy with no prospect of filling the energy gap that is nearly upon us. Our gas reserves are depleting at the rate of 7% every year. We are importing between 11 and 12 billion cubic metres of gas into this country every year, and most of it is again coming from Russia. Year after year, gas and electricity electricity bills are going through the roof. In 1984, comrades, miners and their families were magnificent in the face of the power of the state brought to bear upon them. They fought valiantly, and we will never forget the role played by women against pit closures, and I want to pay tribute to them all today. They were magnificent and they grew. They grew during the strike to provide an all-new social security system in this country that maintained miners and their families for the whole of the strike. I remember one woman saying to me during the strike, "Ken, I never knew there was such a thing as life after marriage." So I pay tribute to the magnificent women against pit closures. I just want to finish, comrades, on this upbeat note, because I always like to finish my speeches sending people away happy and inspired. Regardless of whether or not we ever get the justice we deserve, there is one lovely little certainty that we can take comfort in today. The lady is not for returning. Comrades, it has been my privilege and my honour to be here today to speak to you, and thank you very much.
Ken Capstick. Have a little chorus. Maggots 1, Maggie 0, hallelujah. Maggots 1, Maggie 0, hallelujah. Anyway, right, in a minute we're going to have banner theatre. Before that, there's going to be a group photo on stage, and there's going to be the balloons. There are going to be 95 balloons now are going to be released, one for every miner who was arrested and then acquitted at Orgreave. Acquitted thanks to comrade over there, and